I'm not as loud as Alex. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited about these two people going to speak with us this morning. I first heard them speak, and I can't remember if it was philosophy or inquiring minds, and I was just, well, I'll speak for myself, but I know I speak for a couple of others at how impressed we all were with their vision and their ideas for the future, and I'm so excited that they're here today to share this information with us. But let me give you a little bit of background about the two of them. First, let me introduce Shaun Capehart. He is the co-founder of zey'yə, a public benefit corporation and technology company seeking to establish a sustainable business model for the approaching post-automation economy. As an experienced software engineer that has witnessed the benefits and drawbacks of rapidly implemented automation firsthand, Shaun has joined a growing movement of enterprising idealists that are taking their ambitions for societal progress directly to the public and the free market. It is his hope to spearhead a new movement of ethical automation. And also Jettie Vanderveen. She is the other co-founder of zey'yə and Chief Administrative Officer. Jettie's expertise in cross-discipline administrative workflow, compliance, and procedure have provided her with the foundation necessary to liberate businesses so they can focus on cultivating an environment for their people rather than the tedious, repetitious, and mundane aspects of work life. As a humanist, she believes that the goal of a post-automation economy is to support our human family. So please help me welcome Shaun and Jettie. Thanks.
Does that sound good? Oh. A little feedback. Test? That good? All right. Oh? No? Hello? Is it still echoey? Or is that good? A little feedbacky still? I'll just take the... How's this? All right. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out this Sunday. I'm Shaun. This is my partner, Jettie. I want to also thank my partner, Jettie. This week I got hit with the common cold, and so she actually is the one that put together the majority of these slides, and so I just want to acknowledge all the work that she put in for this. So yeah, anyway, my name is Shaun. This is Jettie. And thank you guys for hosting our discussion here on ethical automation, hopefully not an oxymoron. And we've already been introduced, so you already know who we are. But before we get into the conversation, I wanted to go over some terms real quick, so that way no one gets lost in the conversation. So some of the terms we're going to be talking about tonight, or this morning. We're going to talk about automation. And the way that I define automation is my own personal definition. But it's using technology to decrease the distance between intention and manifestation. Automation anxiety, the increasing awareness of individual depreciation of bargaining power. And those are bargaining power acquired through labor, the time you have to offer, or your domain expertise. We're going to talk about the post-automation economy, and that is when 100% of the labor is facilitated by mechanical muscle or mind. So that would be the point at which you just think up something and then it just ends up being manifested for you. No labor from a human required. And then we're talking about humanism, which is defined as a progressive philosophy of life that, without theism and other supernatural beliefs, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. So do you want to talk about this one real quickly?
Hello? Okay. So we wanted to give, hello? Did I just turn it off there?
There you go. Keep talking into the mic.
Here. Use the handheld. You want to just use this thing?
Okay.
Using the handheld?
Step away from that.
Okay.
Stepping away from that one. Got it. No problem. So automation then, you think of kind of dumb robots doing a singular task, We think of factories where it's just a mechanical arm moving things from one place to another, or screwing in an individual screw, or something very, very, very singular task. But automation now, we have complex robots who can learn visually, just like we do as humans, where it watches a task being completed and it can figure out how to complete it. So we've seen this before. If y'all remember old computers, highly specialized, very expensive, big, kind of clunky, they only did one thing, right? Now, just about everybody in this room, I'll bet, has a cell phone that has a super mega powered computer inside of it. And it is capable of complex, sensitive, really varied tasks. So once this technology becomes accessible, it becomes indispensable. As illustrated here, we adopt and adapt to technology very quickly.
All right, and so as this automation is taking hold in society, something that's becoming palpable is automation anxiety. And automation anxiety is the increasing sense that you are not going to be able to trade on your labor or your time or your expertise in order to generate value for yourself in the economy. And just like with other automation, this is not the first time we've encountered this. So real quickly, I want to talk about Luddites, horses, and workplace automation. So the story that we take from the Luddites, if you aren't familiar with them, this was a social movement back in the 1800s against what they saw was cheating, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the economy by reducing the cost of production while also eliminating those that would participate in the creation of the final product. The Luddites recognized through machinery like the printing press and
Cotton gin and
things like that, yeah. They recognized that they were going to be made redundant in these business processes. And so they actually took to the streets and would actually go and destroy the machines, because they were like, oh my gosh, if you let these things get out there, we won't be able to make a living anymore. Nowadays we make fun of the Luddites, like, Luddites, you're so behind on technology, how could you be so technology averse? But the lesson that we don't take away from the Luddites is that they were right. They were absolutely right. There is no Luddite that's employed anymore because there's no room for a Luddite to be employed anymore.
So everybody always says better technology means better jobs. But when we look at what automation did with horses and automobiles, it's not very comparable at all to mean better jobs. Automobiles obviously were quicker, more convenient, easier to take care of than horses. Everybody went over to horses, right? And peak in 1920, there were over 25 million horses, and then within 40 years, it had dipped down to 3 million because they were just unhirable. So this is a good illustration of 1900 and 1913. You can see there's one automobile in the first picture and no horses in the second one. So we adopt and adapt to new technology very quickly. And legislation can't keep up.
This is one of the big challenges that we faced before, and automobiles represent a great example of where technology actually outpaced legislation. For about 30 years, there weren't a lot of the things that we take for granted, like turn signals, traffic lights, stop
Road
signs, which side of the road to drive on, things like that. And the accident rate was so high back then that we didn't even track injuries because we were like, what's the point? So just as mechanical muscles made human labor less in demand, so are mechanical minds making human brain labor less in demand. And that's a quote from a video by CGP Grey called Humans Need Not Apply. I highly recommend it if you guys have not checked it out yet. You can Google it on YouTube.
We'll post that on the meetup event as well for everybody.
And so that brings us to automation today. So today we've got Deep Blue, Alphago, Google Duplex, and this is a whole new sort of automation that we have not faced before because it can take care of so many more complex processes in a daisy chain sort of effect. So now it's not just the physical jobs that are in danger. Now it's not just us, building automated plows or cars or things like that. We are now beginning to automate the actual process of human interaction. We are now automating what I call cognitive process. And so as we begin to automate these cognitive processes, the market itself is more and more filled with robots conversing with other robots. A good example of that would be the stock market today. Stock market is mostly robots that have trained each other to talk to one another to do things that humans simply can't keep up with anymore. And so this is a mess of a graphic. It's not mine. It's actually from an excellent consulting agency called Horses for Sources. And what they've outlined here is the path that we are on right now. And what you can see up here is a map of actually the corporations that are already at work on this. And this is us taking us from where we are today with no AI at the centerpiece of our business processes to a point where ultimately everything will end up being automated through artificial intelligence. So today we've got data center automation, us running scripts and macros, simple automation like that. But then as we move from the very structured processes over to unstructured, we then begin to utilize new forms of automation in AI. So among those is robotic process automation, which I'll show you guys in a little bit. Cognitive computing, which is the computer being able to look at the information it has available and making an informed decision as to what it should do next. And artificial intelligence, which is actually synthesizing new ideas based off of previous actions. Let's go to the next one. And when you get to artificial intelligence, what you end up finding is that we are not in the process of, we don't have to be concerned about artificial general intelligence in the next 50 years coming for us. What's going to be coming is going to be a mesh of several different narrow AIs working together to create something larger than its single self. So among these different forms of narrow artificial intelligences that are going to be working together, you have image recognition, natural language processing, chatbots, speech recognition, computer vision. All of these working together, orchestrated, is what is going to be what produces the final output for any given business. All of these individual things are things that we thought that you needed humans to do, but it turns out you don't. And so the result is that with automation for businesses, there's really not much competition between people and the robots. It's going to be better for them on the cost and time and labor. So yeah, and that's going to repeat the same thing. Bots don't have to be perfect. They just have to be better than humans is the main takeaway there. And what you might be surprised to find.
Third leading cause of death is medical errors. So I don't think it'll be too difficult for the AIs to start finding trends that maybe human doctors can't find, or moving information in ways that are a little more efficient, a little easier, and AIs don't have scribbly handwriting like doctors.
And this is an example of automation that's going to be coming out very soon. This is Google Duplex. For those of you who aren't familiar with Google Duplex, it is like your Google Assistant on steroids. I'll try to let the video speak for itself here. Oh. How do we get this to play?
The progress with the assistant. As I said earlier, our vision for our assistant is to help you get things done. Don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. What happens is the Google Assistant makes the call seamlessly in the background for you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
I help you?
Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd.
Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around?
At 12 p.m.
We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.?
Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for?
Just a woman's haircut for now.
Okay, we have at 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. is fine.
Okay, what's her first name?
The first name is Lisa.
Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Yeah, they're all pretty psyched about that.
Did you notice it said
So this effectively, whoops. All right, how do we move out of this now? Let's see.
This technology is confusing.
So yeah, as you can see, that what used to be a job of, all right. A job of what used to be vocal, verbal labor, human-to-human interaction, even that is not safe anymore. And moving on from there, creative jobs are not safe either. Robot composers, painters, and screenwriters are already here. And just as an example of that, here is Deep Blue. This is a little bit old now, it's 20 years ago. But that is a man being devastated because he was the best at this before the machine proved him otherwise. We thought that this couldn't happen. Now we have got Alphago, which has actually surpassed Deep Blue and is actually able to beat human players at Go. If you're not familiar with Go, it's like chess, but on steroids. So, and here we have a 19-year-old developer who was able to sell a portrait for nearly $500,000 at Christie's. Now, what's interesting about this is that he had no intention of even seeing this to that sort of level of success. He says, I was really expecting people to use the code as components for their own project, but I never thought anyone would sell it just because it's not high quality work. It was a project I did when I was 17. This is something that he did casually on his own using the technology that's already been made available and was able to create something of greater value without having to put any creative input into this. And though he could have maybe mastered the skills to paint that himself, most of us don't have the courage to just put our creative works out there like that. But the thing with AI is that it has no fear. And the result is that while horses aren't unemployable now because they got lazy as a species, they are unemployable. And there's little work a horse can do to pay for its housing and hay. And many bright, perfectly capable humans will find themselves the new horse, unemployable through no fault of their own. So this is where we try to address this. So while businesses need automation to reduce their operating costs, us as individuals, we need to maintain our financial security. And this is the impasse of automation. Because if you were to reduce the operating costs, eventually it does come at the behest of the individual. But as an individual, you're going to need that financial security. So what we want to do is we want to create a new platform, basically, that enables executives, shareholders, and consumers on the side of organizations, and the consultants, contractors, developers, and domain experts as individuals to work together so that they can preserve their financial security while still lowering those operating costs for the business. And so this is our ethical automation solution. Hence zey'yə, and that's a little acronym there for you, cross-platform ethically implemented automation. All right, so what is ethical automation?
Ethical automation is our mission. It is automation with conscious consideration for those that automation may disenfranchise or displace, make more vulnerable. We want to make sure we're taking care of the people that automation is going to kind of come in and automate.
And so to achieve that, we have two primary points, which is preservation of residual recurring revenue, which is to ensure that the people who enable automation actually get to hold on to the recurring revenue that business processes generate, and a basic guaranteed income, which would be generated by the excess value of the automation platform. The way that we go about generating the basic guaranteed income is different than other models that I've seen proposed thus far. This basic guaranteed income is generated specifically through automation. It is not a redistribution of value, it is a distribution of value, because it's value that's accumulated by us, not taken from anyone else, it's just the platform's revenue generates itself. And then we also provide that via a performance dividend and universal dividend. So 1% of our profits is allocated to people who own equity in the platform, and that's to thank them for their contributions and to align the incentives between the people working on the platform and the people who would ultimately be receiving the basic guaranteed income, or they receive the performance dividend, which is the other 99% of that profit. So as we grow that profit for people who are working on the platform, they themselves are going to be earning more money, but that also increases the amount of money that's going to go out in that basic guaranteed income. So here are the three pieces of our automation platform.
We use an AI companion that's a natural language chatbot. You can talk to it through text or voice, just like Siri or Alexa. That hooks into all of your existing workflow APIs or our universal API, the Desktop Autopilot, which is kind of like an autopilot for a car or an airplane, where it navigates your desktop by driving your mouse and keyboard different routes and destinations to complete the different tasks that you train it to complete. Those tasks, those processes, can then be packaged up and licensed on our process marketplace at your own licensing terms of use. So anybody who uses your process, you get paid.
And so this isn't our technology, I just want to preface that with this, but this shows you how the technology does work. This is someone else's implementation of the same idea, but without the ethical automation part. Oh.
Talk to my company bot.
All right, getting the test version of my company bot. Hi, how can I help?
Let's see if I can turn it on.
Type hello world.
I typed hello world.
We said type hello
Unlock
world.
my QAD account.
So what's happening here is that using a pre-programmed route, he's providing the destination, and the RPA is opening all these programs
Please
and
give me
navigating
the
through all the
sales
fields, entering all the information for him.
For which date?
Yesterday.
Which site?
US 10.
So right now he's just saying, run the report. And the computer goes, which report? It was yesterday's report.
And now what
Pops
it's
it
doing
right
is it's opening up the application,
US 10 on the
grabbing all the information. What happened there in the background is that it emailed it to him.
174,380.00.
Type thank you.
I typed
Okay.
thank you.
So really, really simple. But you can see how this is going to end up scaling up throughout every business process that we have. And this is something that's already happening right now. Fortune 500 companies are investing heavily in what we're calling robotic process automation, which is what you just saw there, as an alternative to outsourcing. They're calling this insourcing. And it's because they're able to actually come in at a reduced cost that's even cheaper than sending it overseas to places like India or Slovenia to do this work. And it's those areas of the world that are actually spearheading robotic process automation for themselves so they can continue to own part of the automation economy. So what do we do now that we know that the automation economy is here? Well, for us as individuals, what we're going to want to do is start to acquire economic equity. That's going to be by owning or investing in businesses utilizing ethical automation, or develop a process that can be shared with others. And that could be through the zey'yə marketplace. Or you can also join our Ethical Automation Coalition, become part of the movement for good. What we also need to recognize is that this is going to be the most challenging part of confronting the challenges of ethical automation, is that we have many conversations happening right now that we use to define ourselves, and that will ultimately be made potentially moot in a post-automation economy. What that means is, discussions about things like the gender wage gap, affirmative action, job guarantees. None of those are relevant in a society where all of the work is already automated. And when everyone has access to automation, what you will lose is centralized oversight of production, which means that there are people who are going to be able to produce things like firearms or their own drugs or medical treatments independently without centralized oversight, because you won't have to go to your doctor anymore to get them to sign off on something. You can just ask your computer to make it for you, and the computer will do all the steps necessary to ultimately create that outcome for you. If you want to manufacture a firearm, whether this makes you uncomfortable or not, there is already an organization out there called Defense Distributed, which has made available 3D printable guns, which are as available as MP3s on Napster. And anyone can download this, produce it. It has no serial number, no registration. There's no knowledge of the government that this exists. And as this goes, so will drugs and medical treatments. And one of the last things that we're going to have to address is that we're young. We're the first digital natives coming into having to confront these issues. And our society is not designed to enable people to come forward and address these things while being well-rounded human beings with pasts. It's one of the things I think that we're starting to see right now. Is we have more information available to us than we ever have about anyone in the history of ever. And so because of that, we are going to have to start focusing on the future more than the past, because we're going to have so much information about the past that the idea of generating a better future through reverse accountability will not serve us anymore. My voice is wearing out. Luckily, I think we have a video coming up here, just sort of explaining the situation we find ourselves in.
My mom and dad love to take pictures and home videos. It always seemed nice and totally normal, but I was taken advantage of. My entire life, all of it, ever since I was a baby, has been put on Facebook, and it's completely messed up. I thought they wanted to save the memories for a scrapbook. It wasn't until it was too late that I realized absolutely everything was being plastered on the newsfeed of everyone they've ever met. I never consented to any of it, but that doesn't matter. What could I have done? I'm only a child. It was my parents' job to protect me, not pimp me out for likes. It's so embarrassing. There are pictures of me as a newborn in the hospital. There's even one of me completely naked in the bathtub. That was for my parents' eyes only. And now it's just out there for anyone with a Facebook login to see. It's Ron. Just Ron. I'm only 6, and this website has already erased my privacy. How can I look anyone that I know that they've seen me on a training potty? Who is gonna take me seriously after they've seen me with mashed peas all over my face? No one. That's who? No one. This is something I'll have to deal with forever, even if I tried to delete everything. How do I know that someone out there hasn't already downloaded all of it? And God knows what they're doing with it too. I can't even have a phone pointed at me anymore without freaking out. Who can I trust? You wouldn't go up and film an adult taking a bath and then post it all over social media, would you? Then why is it okay with your child? Some moments are personal. They aren't meant for the entire world. I wish I can get those moments back, but Facebook took them from me forever. My mom and dad love to take pictures and...
So this is the reality that we're facing. And not to go off on too far of a tangent here, but even if you try to avoid this, even if you try to remove yourself from having an online profile, Facebook, Google, these organizations, they do make phantom profiles based off of uploads from your friends and your family that are uploaded via public cameras, things like that. And just having your face in their system doesn't require you to have a profile made for it. As soon as they see the face, they actually just go ahead and make the profile for you and wait for you to sign up. All right, so how does all of this tie in with humanism? So as technology begins to directly manifest ideology, any deviation from humanism can have catastrophic consequences. This is because all of our intentions will be able to be made manifest easier, quicker than we ever have before. When technology is developed in service of humanism, we all flourish by sharing the prosperity that automation yields. So here's our two different visions of where our future can go. Without ethical automation, we end up seeing a consolidation of process value in the hands of a few people who then end up regulating how the rest of us get to live our lives. On the other hand, what we could do is, with ethical automation, enable everyone to participate in the post-automation economy, provide equal access to the benefits of automation, and as automation is used, it benefits everyone else.
And we're not the only ones. This is a huge wave of people coming up. So millennials are known for being very mindful of their impact on the world globally. And we can see this through a couple of different business structures that have made themselves more prominent through the last couple of years. The first being the B Corps, which is a specific level of certification for transparency and sustainability, how you treat your vendors, how you source your materials, all of these kind of really good impact-minded mindfulness standards. B Corps, there's almost 2,000 businesses now who are certified. We are pending certification. Public benefit corporations, which is a whole new structure to create your business through an LLC or a C Corp or now a public benefit corporation. That's what we have done. That means that we are beholden to our mission, and there are almost 4,000 businesses already who are on board with public benefit corporations. And then conscious capitalism, which is huge here in Arizona. Arizona was the 3rd chapter in the world to have conscious capitalism. And there are over 14,000 businesses who believe in that philosophy of business being for the better good of humankind. So I think this is indicative of this big wave of people coming that are trying to think about their wider impact and being able to create the vision of the future that they want.
And real quickly before I leave this slide, I also want to mention in regards to public benefit corporations, the benefit of a public benefit corporation is that it puts the business at the behest of its mission rather than shareholders. So what that means is that normal businesses are designed in order to do one thing, which is maximize profit for shareholders. And that is what drives the consolidation of process value, ultimately diminishing the bargaining power of the individuals. What zey'yə has done, as opposed to other businesses, is by forming as a public benefit corporation, what we've done is put the mission leading before the shareholders. So what did we do when we made our public benefit corporation? We actually made the mission to make sure that we only implement automation with conscious consideration for those that automation may disenfranchise or displace, which means that it is actually impossible for zey'yə to move forward as a business without some level of public oversight indicating, or making sure that whatever we do, we are always putting ethical automation first so that it isn't about zey'yə growing as a business and just expanding its bottom line, but ultimately growing its basic guaranteed income. And there are other businesses out there that I just want to give a quick shout out to. This one is called Give Directly. Give Directly is founded by former Google engineers, and they had a radical idea, which was the best way to eliminate poverty is to give people money. So what they've been doing is developing an infrastructure where they're actually going to towns in Nigeria and Kenya Identifying people who are most in need, one of the ways they do this is through satellite imagery, just seeing who can actually afford a roof over their head. And when they find these people, what they do is they give them the phones for free directly. They set them up with a digital banking account, and using texting, they're able to make transactions with the money deposited directly into their accounts. This has enabled a lot of these villages to leapfrog the existing technological paradigm, bypassing the need for things like ATMs and local banking things like that, and jump straight into a technological economy.
So we need your help. Gotcha,
Thank
sorry.
you.
So we need your help. So as you know, in order to foster the humanist community and advocate for humanist values, it is in our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. And we think that ethical automation and humanism go hand in hand.
All right, so we're just going to wrap up, but before I get there, I just want to say thank you guys so much for hearing us out. This is the beginning of a very long conversation, and I don't think that we're going to have all of the answers, but I am looking forward to doing the Q&A after this. So just real quickly, our goal is to embrace ethical automation to put humanity at the center of technology. We want to reframe the conversation and take the opportunity to expand and grow, and enable individuals and our humanity as a collective to better ourselves. All right, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to come around with the microphone, so if you have a question, let me know.
Hi, thanks. I have one question, which is, you were talking about, one of the things you talked about for people who are being displaced is the notion that they could either, turn to developing processes themselves or invest in companies that are leading the way in automation. But it seems to me that if you're talking about doing that, that there's a huge category of people that are entirely left out. Because when you're talking about processes, the average truck driver who's going to be displaced, or a cab driver, or a teacher, or whoever else, probably doesn't have the skill base to do that, and isn't going to easily acquire it. And if there's competition in that area, it seems like it would be very difficult. And then when you're talking about investing, that's great if you have a lot of spare money. But if you're unemployed or losing your job and you have to support your family, where's the money going to come from to invest? So I'm wondering if that's the solution, if that doesn't leave a huge slice of people entirely out of the equation.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, thank you. Move on. No, this is where our vision of zey'yə comes into play. So my vision for zey'yə is that zey'yə will ultimately, or businesses like zey'yə, we're all competing to get people to have equity in our automation. This is where I believe that the free market is actually going to be intervening and providing a potential solution outside of centralized consolidation of value and redistribution. Even though I think that there's a lot of value in that, and I think that politically that's definitely worth pursuing. I just don't depend on it happening right now. And that's why I think that right now, because our innovation is outpacing the legislation, we do need to start promoting other forms of equity for people. Because what we're talking about is a form of equality of equity in the post-automation economy, or at least equality of opportunity to have equity in it. So for that, we have 3 different ways that we try to address that. So at the top, you have your business owners, right? And for them, in a post-automation economy, what they want is to see reduced operating cost and increased productive output. For the labor force, what they want is to preserve the recurring revenue of those processes that facilitate the business itself. I will not be able...
How do they do that if they don't have any negotiating power?
Well, it's going to ultimately depend on how they want to go about investing their money and their time, right? So the one thing that I can't do, the one thing I will not be able to do as much power as, or as big as automation gets, or, whatever I'm able to develop inside of the organization, is force business owners to give equity to their labor force. That's the one thing that I just can't do, and I just don't know if there's a way for the government to force people to do that either. So the only thing that I can do is provide a means for people in the labor force to try to preserve as much equity in a post-automation economy as possible. I just have to work with what I have, and that's the pragmatic approach. So for them, what I'm doing is We've developed the chatbot, so that way people don't have to learn how to code. They don't have to be developers. They don't have to pick up C++ or Python or OCaml or ReasonML or any of that sort of stuff in order to start making contributions to the automation platform itself. They can start talking their way through how they do their work. Oh, I want to run this annual report. Okay, how do you run the annual report? Well, first I open Excel, and so on and so forth. You'd explain the entire process. And then once you have that process down, at that point, what we enable is smart licensing. Now, with smart licenses, the way this works is any process that you end up automating, you can set a price for what the cost of that is every time it's run by someone. So as long as that cost is less than the cost of doing it yourself manually, or hiring someone to do it for you, or outsourcing it overseas, or to someone cheaper, like a contractor or something like that, then that's going to be tolerable within the market. So let's say that you develop a process to run a government compliance report, like a 1099 for a contractor or something like that. That's a process that could take anyone between 15 minutes and 2 hours to do per every contract they have to get out there. With automation, you can get that down to less than a minute. It's something that everyone has to do, though. So you could either automate this just for your employer, and you can, again, this has to be something that's worked out between the labor and the employer, or depending on what the employer's values are. By automating that, okay, we used to pay this person between $10 and $15 per every time this process was done, based off of the time that it would take for them to perform the task, the frequency they're performing the task, and the pay rate the person performing the task would be earning. As long as it's cheaper than those factors multiplied, then it's still reducing the operating cost and increasing the productive output for the business owner. So there's an alignment of incentive for them there. Now, on that third level that you're talking about, though, people who are excluded from the automation economy because they can't contribute. You know, the example you went to was truck drivers. I'm going to go even further than that. We are all in here the benefactors of slave labor. All of us, I mean, anyone who has a smartphone at the very least. The cobalt in our lithium-ion batteries is mined from Congo. There's no oversight, there's no regulation regarding how that cobalt is required. So a lot of it is acquired through child labor. All of these people don't have the tools necessary to do this any other means but by hand. And these are the people that I'm targeting with our basic guaranteed income project. These are the sort of people who, through no fault of their own, will not have any place in a post-automation economy. They'll have nothing to offer us. But they did make their contributions to it, and we are the direct benefactors of that. So as a humanist, I believe that we do need to take care of them as much as we possibly can.
Back here, and then I'll get
Okay, so you answered part of my first question is how do you incentivize corporations to, buy into this situation, which you have no control over? And then are these automation things that, like, if I contribute my automation sequences, and can I bequeath them? Because otherwise, this is only good for one generation and one task eventually.
Yeah, so the way, so the question was, when something is automated, does the person who automated that task perpetually own the intellectual property, and does that eventually leave us in a position where the next generation has no equity themselves? What I would say to that is that it works just like any other intellectual property. So the bequeathment would work just like how you bequeath your property, your real estate, your investments, your stocks, things like that. So too can this be bequeathed.
Yeah, I'd like to spin this in a little different direction. Without not taking a poll of this room, I'd say that probably a third to a half the people in here are retired. What do you see as our role, many of us who struggle with just how to get our iPhone to work more than the 5% that we use of its capacity? Where do we fit into this kind of thing? Those of us who'd be, say, over the age of 65 or 70, and that's a lot of people, as you know. The bubble of retirees, the baby boomers, is huge, and it's going to be here for 35 years.
I would say a lot of the retirees own a lot of the equity in our current economy. A lot of them are directly invested in many corporations which are already implementing automation in their own processes. As shareholders in these organizations, you are in a position where you can actually advocate for ethical automation to be utilized, advocate for organizations to enable their labor force to preserve equity in the business processes that they're automating for these companies. And you can move the money that you have invested in these companies to ones that do have ethical automation standards. So because you guys have the financing and the ownership of these things, you are in a great position to be able to advocate for this.
And time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and the time.
I had a question also. I'm by no means an expert, but I am somewhat informed on issues like this. I have degrees in technology and in business, so this is a really fascinating intersection of things that I'm interested in. I don't think I know that a lot of people would see it as being naive. I don't see this kind of system as being so. I think it's something that could be functional and could work once it's in place. It's kind of like the Star Trek universe where everything seems to work when it's set out by the screenwriter or the author from a blank page. But would you agree that the biggest problem would be transitioning into this kind of system from the current one, knowing that in the world we live in, it seems that capital seems to have more power than anything. If technology is where all production comes from, and technologies must be purchased by capital, then those with money are the ones that are in control. In moving towards a system like this might work from a perspective of a liberal democracy in which human beings as citizens each have agency in the governmental process, but what do we do in places like America where capital rules all?
Well, it's my belief that, that's a really good question, by the way. It's my belief that, let me think about where to parse that from, where to start.
Well, we can start with the fact that that corporations actually give their lobbyists legislation word for word, which is voted on by senators and congresspeople who have been placed in their positions by the war chest of the corporations, which citizens can't come close to matching.
That is also another issue. Well, let me start with first addressing the transition period, which I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's going to be rough. We have probably a good 8 to 20 years of work ahead of us in terms of this massive transition from the existing labor-based economy to a post-automation economy. Regarding how do we enable people to have autonomy or the ability to influence the economic outcome, even if they don't own equity in a corporation today, as consumers, we have some power. I acknowledge that that is limited in terms of our choices because you only get to choose between the products on the market. But it does at least provide you with the options of choosing which option on the market you want to go with. By introducing something like ethical automation into the free market, what we're introducing to the common consumer is choice. You now get the choice of whether you want to automate using something that's going to consolidate value in a single entity, or ethical automation, which preserves value for all the individuals who contribute along the way.
Once you get into this future economy, I have a reverse question to ask. To whom will the products of this economy sell goods if nobody has a job or money?
Well, hopefully everyone has some money, though you are right that it's likely no one will have jobs, or at least jobs as we recognize them today. But what we propose in this new economic platform is that people will make the transition from being individual laborers to everyone being a form of a specialist, basically. So let's say that you develop a process that is for filling out that government compliance form or something like that. If you start reselling the value of that to every other business and they're all utilizing that, they're all depending on you to make sure now that that process is going to be up to par, it's going to be up to the standard that's currently going on, that it reflects the current compliance requirements. And if you were to fail at that, then someone else is going to make another form of automation for that process that everyone's going to migrate over to because they're going to see more value in that than yours. What that does mean, though, is that you will no longer be a general laborer who showed up at work in the morning and performed a variety of tasks in order to earn your keep. What it means is that you're now in charge of making sure that this small part of the economy is always running smoothly and it's always running most efficiently. And if you fail to upkeep that over time, it's going to introduce the opportunity for a competitor to come into that same space. Now, in the short term, I actually anticipate that there's going to be very little people competing with one another. In fact, I view this as the new westward expansion, where it's going to be much cheaper and much more profitable for people to automate new things and just come in at a cost lower than human operating expenses, rather than competing with one another, trying to see who can come in at the tiniest fraction of a penny, lower than someone else to get that form filled out.
The race to the bottom.
Right.
Okay, back here.
Until the computer does it better.
I don't know exactly how I'm going to phrase this. So in the presentation, you mentioned the Luddite opposition to early forms of developing, I guess, automation-ish. But in those cases, we had more jobs that came out of it, new jobs that came out of it, diversity of jobs that were unexpected, unheard of. Computer science now is something that 40 years ago wouldn't have been a job for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is kind of more about how certain it is that there's going to be this problem and how rapid that problem would actually be when the Luddites were ultimately wrong about being taken out of the economy. They were just shifting their role in the economy.
Well, for that, I'd probably refer back to our horse example. The horse population in America peaked in the early 1900s. It has never come back to anything close to that ever since. And the reason for that is because horses economically can't do much to produce value for us anymore. We can farm faster without them. We can travel faster without them. It's only under specific circumstances where you're going over, particular types of terrain in remote areas or for enjoyment as a hobbyist do horses actually get their value. I shouldn't say hobbyist, but so in that regard, I do not see a way that humans on an individual basis will be able to create value off of their time, labor, expertise, only because as we begin to automate more and more, the automated tasks that we're running are going to be moving at a rate faster than humans will even be able to express the desire for them. In the same way that it's faster now for, like Amazon Go, for instance, is a cashierless grocery store that you can walk into, grab an item off the shelf, and walk out. There is literally no amount of money that you could pay a cashier that would be cheaper than just letting them just walk in and out.
I have a question regarding jobs that seem to me to be impossible to pass down through a piece of robot or equipment, automation of any type, because the person giving you the information isn't there anymore. For example, some of our older people become unable to communicate effectively. Rather than tell you their foot hurts, they'll sit in the middle of the dining room floor and cry. Or if you ask them what's wrong and they say, window pretty. How do you deal with those issues?
The issues, I'm sorry, could you clarify that for me?
Yes. How do you use automation in a situation where I cannot imagine it working in any form? And I used a demented human as an example. Perhaps nonverbal children would also be a good example, etc.
So the question is, how can automation help people in those positions?
Yes,
Yeah.
or even to help the human working with those populations.
I see. Okay. So this is actually one of the things that we're aiming to help with the AI companion. So the AI companion's goal is to ultimately work as a universal translator between the human and the platform itself. Right now we're using chatbots because that is the most universal thing we've got. You know, simple language, you know, everyone can speak, or I should take that back. It's a universal API that allows us to interface with the computers directly. Now, at the end of his life, Stephen Hawking had, for those unfamiliar, the physicist who was wheelchair-bound, he started, using, keyboard commands and things like that, and they had mapped these commands to his hand so that he wouldn't have to, use a full keyboard. But before he passed, they had actually bypassed that and done a direct neural implant so that by simply thinking critically and objectively about what it is that he wanted the computer to hear him say, it would then translate that directly from the neural impulses into the computer. Now this is where I actually find that we need to really focus again on our humanist values, because soon as we are all enabled with this sort of technology that allows us to, with a thought, manifest an outcome, how many of us have said something we regret? No, I'm sorry, I'm young. But because of that, it's important that we put our humanist principles first, because as thoughts begin to manifest our reality, and as technology enables us to do that with an increasing accuracy as to our vision, but without any pushback as to, are you sure about this? We are approaching a time where it's incredibly easy for us to produce an outcome without foresight.
I'm a teacher who is currently trying to prepare students for this upcoming and I think already present world, and I'm looking for ways to prepare the students. My students learn coding. My students do robotics. We just recently did an artificial intelligence scenario which talked about the rights of the human versus the rights of the government. Most of my students, when asked what they want to be when they grow up, they're not saying firemen or doctors. They are saying YouTubers is number one, and the rest want to be engineers, and they want to create apps for mobile devices. What else can I do to help prepare these kids for this world that's coming?
That's an excellent question. I think that you're definitely on the right track by enabling them to understand the technology, and I think that you're doing an especially good job talking about the ethics of the technology. This might sound a little bit radical, but it's my belief that what we need to be teaching children today is how to be responsible gods. All of the kids that we're seeing today are going to be able to manifest their intentions, and we will not have centralized oversight when it comes to this. As I mentioned earlier, there's already the code available online, just like an MP3, for someone to download and 3D print a handgun. That technology is only going to become better with time, and it's only going to become more accessible with time. So what we are in a position of doing now is simply training the next generation to understand what the ethical repercussions are of their choices and get them thinking about consequences now. And then besides that, the next thing I would advocate for is for them to start thinking about ways that they can start preserving forms of equity for themselves. I think that the kids that are talking about becoming YouTube stars, they don't have a bad idea. That's actually a pretty good idea. Turning yourself into a brand, turning yourself into your means of production is one of the only ways of making sure that it can't be taken away from you.
My question is a economic question, you use the term equity, and I'm thinking of this phrase they use on YouTube. It's called monetization, where you'll get 0.5% of whatever advertising revenue that comes in. It's, to me personally, it sounds like a race to the bottom in this sense. It's over and above the cost of living, your overhead, what it costs to pay your bills, what it costs to repair your car, to keep everything in your household running. There's disposable income. Without disposable income, an automated world could crank out countless widgets. There's no one there to buy them because there's no disposable income above the cost of living. And that's the problem we have now with the minimum wage. If a guaranteed, what's it called, a guaranteed what?
A basic guaranteed income?
Yeah, if that's not the equivalent to a living wage, and it's something like a minimum wage, we're going to be still stuck in the same rut.
So the question is, will there be enough money to actually spend in the post-automation economy on the individual level? Mm-hmm. So,
if I could rephrase that, I had almost the exact same question. I was saying, is there going to be a tipping point at which no employer hires anyone but robots because humans won't do it as well and won't do it as cheaply? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, no one has a job because no one hires anyone but robots. Mm-hmm. And before that tipping point at which the entire system would collapse, in the last spasm of desperation, is capital finally going to say, fine, universal basic income, so we don't cannibalize ourselves?
That's a very good question. And I think that this is going to... Oh. Oh. I'm so sorry. So the question was, how are we going to manage this transition from the labor-based economy to the post-automation economy while preserving people's individual ability to actually use this automation that could be displacing or disenfranchising them? And is there going to be an opportunity for us as consumers, or I guess us as participants in the economy at least, to influence how that capital is going to migrate from consolidated business processes to distributed individual income? Is that the right question?
Sort of.
There's going to be nobody having a job, how are they going to pay?
Right. And so this is where I feel that we are going to end up having lots of conversations through this transitionary period. And as far as I can see it, there's only two options, which is going to be redistribution of value through a centralized authority. So that could be through government. Or it's going to be through a free market option, which is going to be competing with the government. So that's basically what zey'yə is doing, is that we're proposing in a very broad sense, we are developing our own utility platform. And we're competing with the government to provide benefits better than the government can. Now, the ultimate outcome of that is, do I know if zey'yə is going to be the one that provides the basic guaranteed income, or will that put pressure on the government to do a better job than us? I don't know. I have no idea where this is going to go in the next 20 years. But what I do know is that it is incredibly important that each and every single one of us have some form of equity in the post-automation economy. Otherwise, we have a system where time is working for some people and time is working against everyone else.
Thank you. Back here.
When people need things done, like get their lawn mowed, clean their house, wash their dishes, are you saying that those are the things that like robots will be doing? Humans won't be doing any of that at all?
Yeah.
But my real question is, what will the humans be doing? How do we live our lives?
That's for the humans to decide.
What's living about?
It's a really good question. I personally don't know what the next step is for humanity after all of our day labor has been automated. We could, focus on interstellar travel. We could focus on philosophy. We could focus on figuring out where it is we came from. There's so many things that we could be doing that we aren't right now, but we're going to have to change how we define ourselves.
Yeah, just following on what Abbas said, I remember hearing an anecdote about labor leader Walter Reuther years ago, back when automobile manufacturing was automating, and so this plant was showing him this great automated machine that builds part of the car. And he said, well, that's very fascinating. Tell me, how many cars is this thing going to buy? But I want to follow on some of what Kyle said and what I can't remember what the other person was asking. There are two directions. There's the apocalypse, and then there's the question you asked: what are people going to be doing? Well, already we're seeing a little bit of this in the sense that there's now craft. Like craft cooking and craft. So it's like, yes, the robots can make paintings, okay, but eventually nobody's going to want to see the robot paintings next to the human paintings, and I think that the direction I think it could go is that once humans, and we've seen this already. I mean, human life is most of our time 200-300 years ago was spent just doing all the daily drudgery of staying alive, okay, and a few people were able to amass enough resources that they could start writing literature and writing music and all this stuff. And we have far more access to leisure and creative. I mean, look at all the people making YouTube videos. Look at all the people writing music in their home studios, okay? So I'm thinking that if we keep the robots do all the dishes, okay, the less drudgery we have in our lives, the less things, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. Now, some people revel in that, which is great. They can enjoy, artisan dishwashing. But the question is, I just see this as a potential for a human continuing to go to the stars, as you said. There's a lot of questions, about the universe that we need to apply resources to. That if all these resources are freed up, especially the resources of fighting wars, okay? I think one of the things that the robots would do was keep the necessity for having war down. If we could just eliminate that, the amazing amounts of energy could be put to more productive purposes.
Those are all very good points.
So what do you think? What do you think of that scenario?
I agree.
Well, I spent my entire career in computers. So there were computer science before more than 40 years ago. So you're a little out of date there. But in the course of the various things I did, I had to train a lot of people. And frankly, there are some people who are never going to get it. And we have to allow for that fact. We also have to allow for the fact that with our current emphasis on not educating people, it's even going to get worse. But on the other hand, most of these people who are not educated, I think, can probably enjoy YouTube videos that show people doing stupid things. So I just wonder whether you have taken into consideration the fact that we do need some sort of educated populace, especially if we're going to be thinking about going to the stars or all of these things. I mean, is this something that you have taken into consideration? Now, I think some of the questions we have had here are asking you to go way beyond your job definition in this particular presentation, and I don't think it's fair to ask you, what do you predict for the future? I mean, who predicted that what the heck is Zuckerberg? Facebook. Who predicted that people would be getting their news from Facebook? So anyway, I would ask you if you have thought about all of these infrastructure things like education.
I've given it some thought. To start with, I'll say that my personal belief is that, anyone here familiar with the time machine? The Eloi will always be with us. We will never, as a species, outgrow our capacity for stupidity. But I would say that in regards to education and making sure that people are educated, for me, it's a matter of making sure that there is accessibility to insight and information. So we didn't get into this in the presentation, but zey'yə is founded on 3 principles: reduce vulnerability, increase insight, share prosperity. In regards to increasing insight, the way that every process is automated in our system is using plain language, just plain, simple English. So if anyone wants to understand how a process works that they requested, be run for them, how does that compliance, form get filled out, or how do you get that quarterly report, or maybe someday in the future, how is it that you perform that medical procedure? All of that is written in a way that the automated processes can understand, but it's also written in a way that you as a human being can understand. So if your curiosity drives you to it, you can learn it.
Okay, this is going to be our last question, but we'll have time for discussion afterwards.
Thanks. I really liked what you talked about as to, someone said, what can we do? And you said about the importance of voting with your dollar and putting your money where your values are. In the companies, in what you purchase, all of that stuff. And moving that where our humanist values move forward. So, and how we kick that ball forward in our everyday actions. I was looking for the Ethical Automation Coalition online, and where do I go to plug into that and continue to have these conversations?
Talk with us after this. That's a great question. Yeah, if you're interested in the Ethical Automation Coalition, come speak with us during lunch. And if you're interested in getting more involved in the company or things like that as well, yeah, come talk with us afterward offline. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, I know there's a lot more comments and questions, but we're going to finish up the formal part of the presentation. A big thank you for Shaun and Jettie. All right, and as you both know, because you've been to others, that we do have our tradition here to mug our speakers. So here's your first official mug. And thank you for what an awesome pair right here and great information. Come and talk to them, and please come join us for lunch so we can continue the conversation. And Alex?
All right, give them one more round of applause, please. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.